Speech Pitch by Iska Sak.
Hi there, and welcome to Speech Pitch by Iska Sak. I'm Paige, and today I have with me my guests, Robin Netzorg and Juliana Francis. So you're both here at Interspeech, and you both are presenting some things, and you've had special sessions, so we'll talk about all of that in this episode. So first off, do you want to tell me a little bit about what your work is, what your affiliation is?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Robin. I am finishing up my PhD at UC Berkeley with Gopala Anumanchapalli and Binyu. And my work generally is I try and really understand and interrogate speaker identity models in an effort to create them that hopefully make them more interpretable more broadly. And this year at Interspeech, I've been primarily presenting on work around trying to understand intra-speaker variability instead of inter-speaker variability. So for example, I'm talking to you right now, but I could also talk like this. I can also talk like this. I can also talk like this. And the way that we typically approach speaker modeling is that we understand the differences between speakers, so we understand how I might sound different than you, Paige. But in terms of the manipulations I just did with my voice, that variability is much less understood, and how that affects speaker perception is much less understood. And so the work that I was presenting this year at Interspeech was all about trying to understand, okay, for doing gender type modification, gender-based modification, how does that actually affect listeners' perspectives on the perceived gender and naturalness of a single speaker just modifying their voice? So what is the perceived gender of this voice and the perceived naturalness of this voice versus what is the perceived gender of this voice and the perceived naturalness of this voice? And it was a really awesome work because we were able to collaborate with Clovian Garut, who's a voice coach at Trans Voice Lessons, and she is amazing at doing this sort of manipulation. And so it was a really fun time. I'll pass over to Juliana.
And yeah, hi, I'm Juliana Francis. I'm from KTH in Sweden. And the work I'm presenting this year is at the show and tell session, which is focused around accessibility technology for people who can't communicate without the use of some sort of text-to-speech system, generally in the form of a lot of people use eye gaze to type words onto a screen, that sort of thing. The work specifically that I'm presenting is around the use of zero-shot text-to-speech and generative imagery as a way to let people have more customizability of these sort of interfaces when they're talking. The specific point of this work is more for children the main point of this work is for children who are maybe perhaps nonverbal autistic children who often use these devices which are more picture-based to represent certain words on the screens. And a lot of the devices are quite limited in the vocabulary available to the children. I'm hoping through the use of the generative imagery, it's going to give them a way to be able to use any words they want to use on the device without being limited. And although I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of generative imagery, this is what I at least view as an ethical usage of it. And then there's using zero-shot text-to-speech. The idea is that this is a way to let them have whatever voice they want rather than just using the voices that are limited on the devices. So instead of only having 5 to 10 voices that the devices may have preset, they can have whatever voice they want instead.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's really great to see these ethical uses of AI and these alternative uses of speech technology and AI because, we tend to see another automatic speech recognition model doing the same thing, just beating the soda, but trying new things, thinking out of the box, trying to actually create technologies to help people is always, something that's great to see. And that's what I like to think about. And I'm glad that you're both thinking about that. And speaking about that, you both had a special session yesterday. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that? What there was there? What went into bringing people together to talk about this topic?
Yeah, definitely. So the special session that we had yesterday basically arose out of last year's special session on speech and gender. And a lot of the queer folks that happened to come to Interspeech submitted to that special session last year. And a lot of us got talking. So me, Juliana, Cleona Hughes, and Francesca Pesagna, all of us were chatting about hey, we should have a special session that primarily tries to focus on queer and trans voices here at Interspeech. Basically, the thought process that we had, and this is very true, is just a lot of speech technology doesn't work for queer and trans people. And speaking to my own work, my pronouns are she, her. I am speaking with a woman's voice. No speech system I've ever interacted with would ever classify my voice as a woman's voice. And a lot of the problems that I think people like me face when we're trying to deal with speech technologies are just not served by current trends in like speech research. And so the hope with the special session is to basically provide a space for exploring alternative paths forward for speech research. And also, in terms of what trans and queer people need out of speech technologies, a lot of us want to learn how to change our voice. Like, if I want to learn how to sound like this suddenly and change my voice, how do I go about doing that? And that's an area where a lot of us believe speech technology has a lot of potential to help. And so the special session, we really tried to basically create a venue for these conversations to happen. And it was really great. Like we had a lot of turnout. We invited a speech language pathologist from The Hague, Henneke Bax, to come give us a talk. And then we had oral sessions from 6 of the accepted papers. Juliana, do you want to say more?
So we haven't really talked to many people who have done a special session. So what goes into organizing a special session?
So I think one of the most important parts of it was just kind of getting the idea together and getting the group together of the people we wanted to do it. I think I was the last person who got involved in organizing it, if I remember right. But, we had to put the proposal together, get the idea put down. We needed to figure out, why was this an important session for Interspeech to do? Why was it important for the wider Interspeech community to have this as a special session outside of the regular sessions that would normally be hosted at Interspeech? Why have this session when there's already some inclusivity sessions going on, that sort of thing? And what it came down to was putting down a statement. This is important because there's a lot of insights around queer and trans voice, like Robin was talking about, surrounding the voice modification and the ways that a lot of trans people especially are able to modify their voice in ways which are maybe outside the norm, which give insights that might not exist normally, as well as providing a way for Interspeech attendees to kind of see how their work could actually be applied in other circumstances outside of maybe what they were already thinking about. And what we then ended up having to do was, you need at least six papers for a special session to be accepted. So we had to, with the 50% acceptance rate, they expect us to find at least 12 people who are willing to submit. And so we had to get together, we had to contact enough people to get 12 people who told us that, yeah, we're happy to submit to this session, or we'll probably submit to this session. And after that, they let us know if it's going ahead or not, or they let us know if it's an accepted session. And then we kind of just wait around for a while. We hope people submit enough papers. We follow up with people. We mail certain mailing lists to make sure people know that this is happening and it's a thing they can submit to. And then eventually we find out after all the papers are accepted. We found out quite late that we were getting to run this session, just because of when the deadlines happened and everything. And then we were waiting for an email for the confirmation around whether our session was happening. And I mean, then most of the organizing kind of just involved answering questions from authors and letting them know where they needed to send their PowerPoints to, and then kind of just hoping things went right on the day.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's very interesting. I've helped work on organizing workshops in other venues, and I'm interested. I found it interesting that you have to adhere to the 50% acceptance rate even for a special session, because in other venues, they might have 40% acceptance rate, but you can accept 100% on a workshop or something. It doesn't really matter. So that's something to definitely for people to keep in mind for organizing their sessions.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think because the special session is still part of the conference and all the papers that are in the special session are part of,
the proceedings. Yeah.
It's very important. And it is also with running a special session, especially something that is, hasn't been seen before, you really need to convince the reviewers of the proposal that this is actually you actually can get all of these people to submit.
Oh, is that? And do you have to find your own reviewers, or do they come from the general pool?
Yeah, so we had to basically go out and contact people who met the requirements for doing reviews to reach out to them and make sure we had enough people who knew enough about this topic to be able to review it. I'm not 100% sure if all the reviewers on all the papers are...
They weren't.
They weren't?
Yeah, no, and that's fine, but it's basically My understanding is that every paper at least had a few reviewers that were like familiar with the topic. But I think in order to meet the like full requirement, there might have been some reviewers that were sent in as needed. But it was, I don't know. I think it's still like pretty good process for reviewing.
Yeah, that's nice.
I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to have the mixed reviewers too, because you have some that are familiar with the topic and some that are familiar with it more in general. So, you know, it helps out to make sure that you have the ones that actually understand what's going on. They understand like around like the queer and trans research that we're talking about. But then you also have the people who understand the work in general and maybe can see how it applies to other areas. And it's obviously possible you'll get people who don't know the area as well as a result of it being something that they maybe don't look into that much. But it's good to have that balance.
I mean, it is also, I mean, it is also very important because it's still like all these papers are speech papers. You know, it's still everything I was working on, everything that a lot of the folks in our special session were working on, were all still relevant to all other aspects of speech processing and science. And so having the mixed reviewers is still, I think, a helpful thing.
Okay. And then once the reviews are done, is it the ACs of the general conference or is it the session chairs that decide which papers are accepted?
We have some say, but it's basically like what happens is that we get a list of the papers that are like, okay, these are the reviews, these are the meta reviews, and then you can have some comments, and then the ACs decide.
Okay.
And so like we don't have a final say, but it is like we can, if there's anything that is like completely not a fit, like if someone was like, oh, hey, here's a paper on dysarthric speech or something, we'd be like, hey, that's a really cool paper, but maybe it doesn't belong in the like special session.
Right. That makes sense.
And also it's possible that, say we didn't get enough accepted submissions, it's possible that if there's something that's close enough that's been submitted somewhere else, it might end up in our session instead. I don't think that happened this year, just based on all the papers that were involved. All of them were very directly related to this, but I think it happened last year on the speech and gender special session, that some of the papers were put there because they were close enough to match that session, if I remember right.
Okay. We're coming to the end of our time. I just wanted to ask one last question. If there's any other, I've heard of some other events going on at Interspeech for queer and trans folks. Do you want to put a mention in for, obviously not this year, but for next year to attend, to keep an eye out?
Yeah, I mean, for next year, I think our special session went really well. We want to try and host it again next year, if not make it a workshop. We had a lot of interest, a lot of people showed up, a lot of people asked amazing questions. We're really hoping that conversations do start from the special session. I don't know, really looking forward to next year's Interspeech. I think if we do this again, it's only going to be bigger and better.
Yeah, like Robin was saying earlier, we were really happy with the attendance. We think there was about 100 people went to the special session, which, I mean, that's a lot of people to go to a special session on this sort of topic, especially. It was pretty great. So hoping to run it again in Sydney next year.
That was really great. I learned so much, and good luck with planning for next year. I hope you have another great turnout and great attendance. And so Robin, Juliana, I'm really glad that we could have a chat. And so thanks for tuning into this bonus episode. We might be interviewing your favorite speech researchers in the future, so be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow the ISCA SAC on X and LinkedIn to stay updated. Until next time, have fun.
Speech pitch by ISCA SAC.